This tutorial we're going to cover creating the intro to the Batman vs. Superman titles tutorial. In the folder with all the content you'll find a folder called 1-intro. You'll want to import that in. Those are the files that will create the approximately 14-second introduction element at the beginning of this title sequence. And when we complete it, it'll look something like this. To get started, we're going to create a composition that's 854 by 480, and I'll name it 1-intro. It will be one of 6 compositions that will be composited afterward as one output movie. I'm going to set the time for 14 seconds, and I'll click OK. And the first thing we're going to do is introduce a blank layer that is black. So either I'll go up to Layer, New Solid, or I'll hit Command Y. I'll make sure that through my color picker the color is black, and I'll click OK. Now the first thing we're going to do is we're going to add fractal noise to this. So I'm going to go to Effects, and I'm going to go to Noise and Grain, and I'm going to choose Fractal Noise. I'm going to go to the Effects channel in the upper left-hand corner now, and I'm going to choose a fractal type. I'm going to change from basic to dynamic. I'm going to zoom back on my comp window here because I want to animate this right now. If I was to drag through, it's pretty static. So the first thing we'll do is we'll open up Transform, and you'll see Offset Turbulence, and you'll see a little target that precedes the blue numbers, which allow us to change the position of the beginning of this fractal noise. So I'll make sure my playback heads to the beginning of my timeline, and I'll drop the first keyframe for Offset Turbulence, and I'll grab the target and I'll drag it outside kind of the lower left hand corner here. I want it to go diagonally from the bottom left to the upper right, and I'll do it about the same distance as the perhaps width of the comp window. Now I'll go to 14 seconds, and at 14 seconds I'll drag that target over to the opposite corner, roughly the same distance. So now if I was to play that, we've got this thing kind of moving left to right. Now that's a little static still, so I'm going to go back to the beginning of my timeline. I can drag it back or I can hit home on the keyboard. And we're going to open up the evolution. If you don't see the tab for evolution open, just click on the triangle to the left. I'm going to drop a keyframe at the first frame in the comp. I'll go to the end of the comp, and I'll just put in the random number of 6. And this is kind of subjective, but you'll see now that that fractal noise is now pulsing as it moves from left to right. Now that we have the background ready, we're going to introduce the Warner Brothers logo. Now in order to drop in the Warner Brothers logo, I've gone back to the project window. And usually you can click on it side by side with the effects channel. If you don't see that, you can reduce the size of the comp window and usually it'll show up. If it doesn't, you can also go to Window and you'll see Project tab down below, or you can hit Command 0. Now that the background is animated, we'll go ahead and we'll introduce the Warner Brothers grayscale logo. I'm going to grab the .png and put it on screen. And this is going to take place between 2 and 4 seconds. So I'll start my playback head at 2 seconds. At 2 seconds I'll hit S for scale. I'll drop the first keyframe, and I want it to be at 0% scale. I'll move to 4 seconds, and then I'm going to bring the scale up to about 80%. So we should have a 2-second lag in the beginning and then a 2-second animation. Now we're going to animate the Batman Superman movie logo at the same rate. So I'll put my playback head at 2, and I'm going to trim the endpoint of the Warner Brothers logo just so I have a visual reference where this thing begins. So I'll get the Batman logo, Batman Superman movie logo, and I'll put that on screen as well. And I'll take the opportunity now to hit Option and open bracket to edit that there at the same time. I'll hit S for scale. I'll drop a keyframe and I'll reduce the scale to 0 as well. Now I'll go to the 4-second interval. I can punch the 4 in the corner of the timeline, or I can hit K on the keyboard. It'll go to the next available keyframe, which happens to be the one for the Warner Brothers logo at 4 seconds. And now I'm going to drop the scale of this down, and I think I'll drop that to about 80%. And they'll probably stagger, and the Warner Brothers logo is going to start off on top. So I'm going to go ahead and change that layer order so that the black and white logo is above the Batman symbol. And I'm going to leave that at 2 seconds. And I'm going to turn off the Batman logo for now because we need to put a shatter on that black and white Warner Brothers logo. If we were to take a look at the outcome of this, as we drag through, you see it comes to full scale and then shatters. So that's what we're going to put on that layer now. Now I'm going to put my playback head at the beginning of that clip, and I'm going to do that so I know where I need to trim the composite layer I'm going to make. So I'll hit I on the keyboard with the clip selector, and it goes to the beginning of that clip now. I'm going to go to Layer, and I'm going to choose Pre-Compose, and I'm going to make sure all the attributes are moved into that new pre-composed layer, and I'll name it Shatter. And then I'll go ahead and trim it at the 2-second mark. I'm going to drag so I see the logo on screen. And then I'm going to go to Effect, Simulation, and I'll click on Shatter. And the first thing that will happen is the image will disappear. So I'm going to go to the left-hand corner into the Effects channel, and across in the word View, you'll see Wireframe and Force. I'm going to choose Rendered. And then I'm going to go back to the beginning of the clip, and I'm going to open up Force 1. Now, when I look at this, the only thing I really need to change is the radius right now. The radius by default is usually 0.4, so I'm going to zero that out. And now, if I click and drag through, I should see my geometry in its entirety again. Now, I don't want it to shatter until it comes to full scale, which is 4 seconds. So I'll put my playback head at 4 seconds. And under Force 1, radius, now that it's zeroed out, I will drop my first keyframe and leave it at 0. And now I'm going to move to second, well, I guess I'll go to second 8. And then I'm going to drag on the radius until I see all the pieces go off screen. Now, the first thing I want to do is that once I drop that keyframe, I'm going to back up using my playback head to see the pieces because there are a number of changes I want to make to this. So as long as I see some of the content on screen, I'll be able to kind of judge what it's going to look like as I make these changes. So I'm going to go up to Shape, and instead of bricks, I'll use glass. So I'll go ahead and click on glass, and now I can see a number of shards. I'm going to go and I'm going to change the extrusion depth to 0. And now they are kind of paper thin, more like glass. Now while I'm up there, I'm going to make the repetitions that are a default 10. Oh, I think maybe I'll bump them up to about 20. And again, this is really kind of a subjective call. As I drag through, I can see the pieces kind of going off screen. Now I don't want them to drop to the bottom. I'd rather they came straight out. So once again, I'll drag to see where the shards are on screen. And then I'm going to close Shape, Force 1. I'll open up Physics, and I'm going to make the gravity 0. So now if I drag through again, my shatter goes straight out. And I'll hit Command S to save. Now that I have the shatter on the Warner Brothers logo, I want to turn the layer with the Batman symbol back on. I want to stagger these so that just as this is shattering, perhaps I start to see the scaling Batman logo appears. So I'm just going to kind of drag on this till I get something that might work well for me. Try it from here and see what we've got. That works pretty good. So I'll hit Command S to save. Now we're going to animate the text that comes on screen. So if we were to take a look at the outcome of this, just as the shatter completes, we start to see Batman versus Superman and then Dawn of Justice. Now there's one thing we have to do before we animate the titles, which is the Batman versus Superman. We've got to delete it from our folder because we have to bring this in separately in order to get the layers that we want. So I'll hit delete. I'll leave the folder open so that it goes inside the intro folder to keep this a little bit organized. And I'll go back out and import that PSD again. I'm going to select it and I'm going to go down to the bottom where it says import as footage, and I'm going to choose composition retained layer sizes. And what that will do is allow us to access these files individually. You'll see that once it comes in, there's a composition as well as a folder. I'm going to open up the folder, and there are the separate elements. So I'll start to place these on screen roughly where I'd like them to go. And now I'll scale these down a bit so we can fit the VS in there. So let's drop the scale down to about, I'm going to make it about 80%. And then I'm going to kind of place each of these equidistant from left and right and top and bottom. And we're going to introduce these at approximately second 7. So I'll go to 7 seconds on my timeline. I'll select both text elements and I'll hold down the option and hit the open bracket. I'd like them to be in this position once they come to rest. Now I'm going to advance to second number 9. And at second number 9, I'm going to hit P for position. And if I do that, both of them show position. And I'll keyframe both. Once I've set the keyframes for where I would like this to be on screen, I'll go back to the beginning of those clips at 7 seconds. And I'll take them individually and drag them off to their respective sides. So I'll click and drag Batman off to the left. And then I'll drag Superman off to the right. So if I drag through now, I've got both of those elements coming onto screen. Now I'm going to drop the V in, so I'll put my playback head at the 9-second mark where it'll be full scale. And I'll grab the VS and I'll drop it in right about there. I'll scale it down so it's considerably smaller. And I don't want it to be much bigger than that. So once I've got it placed where I'd like it to be when it comes to rest, I'll hit P for position, drop the first keyframe. I'll hold Shift and S to drop the first keyframe for scale because it's primarily going to be going from small to large, but we may have to move the position as well. Now I'll go to the 7-second mark here, and at the 7-second mark I'm going to clip it, and then I'm going to make the scale 0. Now if we play this through, we should get what we want here. Now we'll animate the Dawn of Justice text that appears on the bottom, and it pretty much falls within the same time range. I'll go over and grab that PNG. I'll put it into position, and it will come to full scale at the 9 seconds. So I'll go ahead and place my playback head there. It's going to be a scale change, so I'll hit S for scale. I'll drop the first keyframe and decide on the size I want it to be when it kind of hits optimum scale. I'm making it a little bit smaller than the title text at the top, about 75%. I've dropped the first keyframe, and now I'm going to go to the 7-second mark, and I'll zero out the scale, and I'll hold down the Option key and hit the open bracket to trim it in my timeline. What we should have as far as our text goes is this. And that pretty much completes this first segment.